I never thought I would be standing in my childhood home as a stranger, a guest in a place that was supposed to be mine, a house filled with memories, laughter, and love, except none of that belonged to me anymore. I had spent my whole life being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never complained, never asked for too much, never caused any trouble. I worked hard in school, got the best grades, stayed out of trouble, and did everything my parents ever asked. And for what? To be tossed aside like I never mattered. I had been saving for college since I was 14. Every birthday, every holiday, every extra dollar I made from tutoring, I put it away because I knew my parents weren't rich. They always told me, "We'll help as much as we can, but you have to be responsible too." And I was. Then came the day I got my acceptance letter. I still remember the way my hands trembled when I opened it. The excitement, the relief, I had done it. A full acceptance into one of the best universities in the country. My dream was finally coming true. I ran downstairs, holding the letter like it was made of gold, and when I showed my parents, they smiled. My father clapped me on the back and said, "We're so proud of you." My mother wiped a tear from her eye and whispered, "You deserve this." I should have known it was all a lie, because 2 weeks later, when I asked about my college fund, my mother hesitated. My father looked away. Then the truth came out. "We had to use it," my mother said, "for something more important. More important. More important than my future. More important than the years of work I put into making sure I could go to college." And then she said it. "Your brother and Emily needed help with their house. They were struggling, and we couldn't let them lose it." I felt the air leave my lungs. My head spun. My brother, the same brother who barely finished high school, the same brother who spent his entire life making reckless decisions, knowing that our parents would always bail him out. The same brother who told me last year, "College is a waste of time." They had taken my future and handed it to him and his wife like it was nothing. I could barely breathe. "So, what about me?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. "What am I supposed to do now?" My father sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You're smart. You'll figure something out." My mother reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "You can apply for loans," she said. "You'll be fine." Fine? Fine. I had spent my whole life doing everything right. I never asked for anything, never made mistakes, never let them down. And in the end, none of it mattered. They still chose him over me. That's when I knew. I wasn't their priority. I never had been. But that was about to change, because if they thought I was just going to accept this betrayal and move on, they had no idea who they had just created. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't even argue. I just stared at them, at the people who were supposed to protect me, and felt nothing. I walked upstairs, packed my things, and left. No goodbyes, no final words. If they didn't care about my future, then they didn't deserve to be a part of it. I crashed at a friend's place for a few weeks, working whatever shifts I could find to make some money. But every night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the anger burned inside me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the way they discarded me, the way they made me feel like I was nothing, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I started digging. My brother and his wife weren't as struggling as my parents made it seem. They had been living beyond their means for years, spending money they didn't have on expensive vacations, designer clothes, and luxury cars. And when they couldn't keep up, they ran to my parents like spoiled children, knowing they'd be bailed out. It made me sick. Then I found something interesting, a little detail they had conveniently left out. The house they saved with my college fund. It wasn't just in my brother's name, it was in my parents' name too. They hadn't just helped him, they had invested in it. They had stolen my future to secure their own. And that was their biggest mistake. Because if they thought I was just going to move on, they were about to learn exactly what I was capable of. I spent weeks planning my next move. Revenge wasn't just about making them feel the way I felt. It was about taking back what was stolen from me. The first thing I did was gather evidence. If my parents had invested in that house, there had to be paperwork, something legal, something that could be used against them. I started with my mother's emails. It wasn't difficult. She had used the same password for years. I had learned it when I was 16, back when she asked me to help her with online shopping. She never changed it. That was her mistake. Scrolling through her inbox, I found exactly what I was looking for: an email from the bank, loan agreements, property transfers, even a document where my parents signed as co-owners of the house. They hadn't just helped my brother, they had tied themselves to his sinking ship. And now I had proof. But that wasn't enough. I needed to hit them where it hurt. So I reached out to someone who hated my brother just as much as I did, his former business partner, Ryan Walker. Ryan had once been my brother's best friend. They had started a small business together years ago. But my brother had betrayed him, stolen money from their company, and left him drowning in debt. Ryan had tried to take legal action, but my parents had stepped in, paid off the right people, and buried the case. Ryan lost everything, and he never forgot. When I called him, he was hesitant at first. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice cold. "You're his sister." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not anymore." There was a pause. Then he sighed. "What do you want?" I told him everything: the stolen money, the house, the lies, how my parents had protected my brother at my expense. He listened in silence. Then he said, "I'm in." That was all I needed. Now I had an ally, and together we were going to make sure my brother and my parents paid for what they had done.
Ryan and I spent the next few weeks working in silence, careful not to draw any attention. This wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about making them feel the consequences of their actions. I started by planting the first seed of doubt. My parents still thought I had disappeared, but I made sure they heard my name again, through whispers, through rumors. I contacted an old neighbor, someone who loved to gossip. Over coffee, I accidentally let it slip that I had found a lawyer, that I was looking into legal action over my stolen college fund. It didn't take long for that rumor to reach my parents. My mother called me that night, her voice a mixture of guilt and panic. "Sweetheart, we should talk. You don't have to do this." I let her talk. Let her try to manipulate me like she always did. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the obedient daughter. "I don't need to do anything," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." And then I hung up. The panic was setting in. I could feel it, but I wasn't done. Ryan had spent years collecting dirt on my brother, proof of the money he had stolen from their failed business. With my help, we gathered all the evidence into one neat little package: financial records, email exchanges, bank statements, enough proof to destroy him legally. And then we leaked it, slowly, carefully. A missing document sent to his wife, an anonymous tip to an old investor, a quiet email to the bank flagging suspicious activity. The walls were closing in on my brother, and my parents. They were right there with him, tied to every shady deal. Then came the final blow. Ryan and I filed a lawsuit, not just against my brother, but against my parents, too. I was suing them for taking my college fund under false pretenses. And Ryan? He was coming after my brother for every stolen cent. By the time my parents realized what was happening, it was too late. My father called, his voice shaking with anger. "You can't do this. We're family," I laughed. "Were." And then I hung up. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through my family. My brother panicked first. His wife found out about the financial fraud before he could spin another lie. She packed her bags, took their kids, and left. Then came my parents. They tried to fight back, calling relatives, pulling every connection they had, hoping someone would come to their rescue. But no one did, because I wasn't the only one they had wronged. The very people they had manipulated over the years, the friends they borrowed from and never paid back, the relatives they looked down on, had finally had enough. One by one, they turned their backs. My mother tried to reach out again. I let the call go to voicemail. Her voice trembled in the recording. "Please, we just want to talk." I never called back. The lawsuit dragged on for months. My brother's reputation was in ruins. He lost everything: his job, his business, his home. The house they had stolen from me, it went up for sale, the bank reclaiming what it was owed. And my parents? Their savings drained as they struggled to cover legal fees. The life they had built on stolen money was falling apart, piece by piece. I wasn't happy, I wasn't celebrating, but I was satisfied, because for the first time, they understood what it felt like to be powerless, to be discarded, to be nothing. And as I stood in front of my new apartment, the one I had paid for, with money I had earned, I realized something. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their regret. I had my revenge, and I was finally free.